Hello all, and welcome to a brand new MurderDrones theory. Here, we like to do theories after big episodes, so if you'd like to watch the previous theories to see exactly what we get correct, you can click the card at the top right of the screen, which will bring you to the full playlist. This episode is going to be a pretty big one, because we won't just figure out what's going on in these last two episodes, but we will try to understand the entire story of MurderDrones. First things first, I'm very happy to say that we once again got another MurderDrones theory correct. We thought that the condition of a drone and their ability to be affected by AbsoluteSolver were dependent on each other, and they are. We will go into that a little bit later in this video, but for now, let's start by looking at Sin. There seems to be a common misconception that the big enemy in this show that is taking over these drones is Sin, but I don't think this is the case. These characters are constantly talking about trying to disrupt Sin's plans, but these plans don't seem to be coming from Sin at all. If we really want to figure out what's happening, we have to compare what we see happen to Sin and what we know from the show. There are a few characters that experience a similar situation as Sin during episode 5. Our biggest one is Jay. Jay completely turns into the eldritch monstrosity in episode 2 and starts trying to kill our main characters. Now, one thing we always go back to here is the error that was burned into the wall once Jay became this eldritch form. The reason Jay became eldritch was due to an error. She had insufficient materials to successfully reboot. Now that we once again connect this eldritch form to AbsoluteSolver, we can use something that we see for just a few frames in episode 5. At the beginning of this episode, we can see a huge pile of discarded worker drones. As we travel underneath, we can see one that's been marked for disassembly. However, even though it's supposed to be dead, it somehow wakes back up. Luckily, we can see the HUD of this drone for just a few frames. Most of it is unreadable, but there's one very clear word: absolute. Right under is a question asking if access will be allowed. Just like with Jay, after the body was destroyed, the AbsoluteSolver program is allowed access. The main difference is that this garbage drone doesn't turn eldritch. The AbsoluteSolver didn't take over, only gained access. Where have we heard this before? The idea of a drone coming back to life. Ah yes, that's right. In episode 4, we can see a VHS training video all about something called zombie drones. We get a hint of what a zombie drone is through Uzi, who gains disassembly drone type additions made out of organic material. We don't actually see the VHS tape until the very beginning of the next episode. This training video warns all about the proper disposal of drones. You must mark them with an armband, clean their software, properly disconnect the core, and fully disassemble them in a disassembly unit. If these are not done correctly, this can create a zombie drone. This is exactly what we see with the garbage drone. It was marked for disassembly, but we know for sure it wasn't done correctly because the drone is still able to boot in some way. And once again, this happens with Jay. Her body was destroyed, but none of the precautions were taken, and she was able to come back. Now, the way Jay comes back is much different. She doesn't turn into a zombie drone, she becomes eldritch. With the garbage drone, the AbsoluteSolver has gained access, but with Jay, the AbsoluteSolver has taken full control. Episode 6 is able to explain this very well. In this sequence, our new character Alice opens an oven to show what are labeled as cores. When we switch to the angle inside the oven, we can see that these cores are the exact thing we saw run from Jay's eldritch corpse at the end of episode 2. It would seem that this AbsoluteSolver program is contained at the very core of the drone. Once the drone doesn't have enough control or resources to allow for a boot sequence, this AbsoluteSolver core Solver takes over with no functions that can suppress it. This is also what we saw happen in episode 1 after N's head was blown off. We can see this line, string AbsoluteSolver blocked by Administrator Sin. N is still intact enough that his body can suppress and block the AbsoluteSolver program. At the bottom, we can see that he is able to restore his data and boot in safe mode. J and RemGames experience very different things with the same program. The AbsoluteSolver seems to once again be making a name for itself here, but let's take this one step farther. We can see that all of our main character drones in episode 5 have the marked for disassembly armband, including Sin. In fact, they are even called dumpster pets in the gala.
We will not entertain your dumpster pets.
We already know that the dumpster is where these drones are discarded, but Sin is able to drive that home by saying this.
We can no longer be thrown out.
These drones are, or were, meant to be disassembled, but what if there are hints that one of them was already discarded? We hear from Tessa's mother that she already wanted Sin dealt with.
Oh, Christ almighty! I said this one out of my sight! Still can't follow simple orders.
Sin was already meant to be thrown out. But what if Sin actually was already thrown out? Tessa keeps locking her in the basement, and when Tessa sees Sin behind N, she gets very disappointed and somewhat unnerved.
Oh, who'd you bring with you?
Sin seems to already have been thrown out, but somehow keeps coming back. So far, it's starting to seem like Sin isn't the actual enemy here, but AbsoluteSolver is. To truly see if this is correct, we need a piece of hard evidence. Towards the end of episode 5, Sin is in the gala killing everyone. At the same time, there is still an active eldritch creature in the basement that is attacking N. Sin cannot be in multiple places at once, but AbsoluteSolver can. This isn't Sin. Sin, like we mentioned before, is the administrator for this group of drones, but this drone was meant to be disassembled. Just like we saw with the garbage drone, who was also meant to be disassembled, it wasn't done properly, and so the AbsoluteSolver program took over. The character we see is no longer Sin, but the AbsoluteSolver program taking over her body. Sin seems to be our patient zero, our first of the infected. Sin is not controlling AbsoluteSolver, but instead, AbsoluteSolver is controlling Sin. We just learned a big piece of information. Our big bad isn't just one person, but just like we thought in our previous videos, this big bad is a program that is built into these drones. This AbsoluteSolver program seems to be built into every drone, but only comes out when a drone is destroyed and or not properly disposed of. Now, our next big question is, if JC Jensen in space knew that this was a possible consequence of improperly disassembled worker drones, why did they create these disassembly drones? Right off the bat, you may think that I answered my own question. They wanted all these drones killed and disposed of properly so as to not reawaken this program. The way to properly disassemble a drone, as seen by episode 5, is so specific and important that it would be hard for humans to do it all themselves. But now I ask you, does this look like proper disposal? There is clearly something else going on here, so let's really look at episode 5 again. Around halfway through the episode, we can see what looks like a shrine. This appears to be similar to a disassembly drone, but with many key differences. This one has the worker drone butler helmet, and the connection of the wings to the body looks much different than a normal disassembly drone. This here looks more like a prototype than an actual disassembly drone. We can see much more when we actually go into the basement. We can see a broken zombie drone sitting on a chair with various parts around it. The biggest things in this scene are actually what's around this drone. We can see more prototype disassembly drone wings, the disassembly drone headpiece, and even a disconnected version of the tail. This zombie drone right here is currently being assembled into a disassembly drone. One thing that's not yet a part of this drone are the iconic limbs, but luckily we've actually already seen these limbs in this episode. Going back to the very beginning of the episode, during the zombie drone training, we can actually see these exact limbs being used on the disassembly unit. The idea of AbsoluteSolver being able to construct new things is even reinforced with Sin being locked up with Tessa and Jay. Sin takes a bug and uses it to construct a brand new creature. The limbs for the disassembly drones are taken from these actual disassembly units. There is one final disassembly drone quirk that we haven't yet discussed: the X over the eyes. Once again, episode 5 provided exactly what we needed. Towards the end of the episode, when Sin is taking over the gala, Tessa and Jay burst in to stop her. In a response, Sin's body uses, once again, the AbsoluteSolver program to take over the drones in the gala, including Jay, which are all marked with an X over their eyes. The humans didn't make these disassembly drones. The AbsoluteSolver did. This is why we see these strange prototypes all throughout episode 5, only in relation to AbsoluteSolver related places and not near any humans. It even hinted at its intentions through Sin in the gala when it mentioned they couldn't be thrown out anymore. These aren't disassembly drones, these are disassembled drones. We even get this hint with their armbands. The same armbands we see the disassembly drones wear were originally meant to mark a drone for disassembly. This would even make sense for why the disassembly drones aren't properly disassembling these worker drones, because it would benefit AbsoluteSolver more if they were destroyed improperly. This is how it would expand and or create more disassembly drones. This is a huge piece of information we just got, but once again, we now have a new question to ask. What happened to Yeva and Nori? They aren't disassembly drones, and whatever they had was so different that it was able to be inherited by their children. Well, now we have to turn to episode 6. Around halfway through the episode, Tessa says this:
"We know it mutates in damaged AI.
One thing we definitely know about the AI in MurderDrones is that it's genetic. If a parent has corrupted AI, so will their child. If Yeva and Nori's AI were corrupted, the same would happen to Doll and Uzi. At the beginning of the episode, Tessa also says this:
She reckons the humans did something to her folks down here. Gave them a sickness she inherited. I think she's right.
If the humans messed with Yeva, meaning corrupted her AI, this would make perfect sense for how this was passed to Doll. Some of you might question why they would do this to their own drones, but I mean, they're in a lab with a torture chamber. These humans don't care in the slightest what happens to these drones. This right here tells us everything we need to know to fill in the blanks. Uzi and Doll are corrupted by AbsoluteSolver, but in a different way. They are being corrupted slowly. The more they use it without true knowledge, the more it corrupts them and takes over. We see this in the duality of Uzi and Doll. Doll, who understands AbsoluteSolver and who can most likely understand it enough to suppress it, is able to control her own body. Uzi, on the other hand, is actively losing more and more of herself to this program. Instead of being immediately affected by AbsoluteSolver like the other zombie drones were, Uzi is being slowly corrupted as she is still a working drone. The humans corrupted Yeva and Nori's AI, which was inherited by Doll and Uzi. The final thing we will discuss are the Sentinels. These Velociraptor drones were first revealed in the last episode, so we don't have too much to go off of here, but I think we still have enough to explain their presence. The first thing we see about these is the fact that they are meant to only kill drones, with the fact that they are called anti-drone sentinels, but this idea is also reinforced by looking at their heads. These sentinels are built with a flash beacon directly on their heads that is meant to boot loop and stun these drones. It would seem that these Sentinels were always meant to be a failsafe against these drones, especially considering they aren't supposed to harm humans. These Sentinels are most likely the humans' response to the infected drones to try and destroy those who are infected. This is even reinforced with the fact that these Sentinels were only released in this lab on Copper 9 because it is the only place around where we've seen that JC Jensen would know about an infected drone outbreak. AbsoluteSolver and JC Jensen are two very separate entities. JC Jensen was attempting to control the AbsoluteSolver outbreak through the use of the Sentinels. AbsoluteSolver is attempting to take over and destroy everything by building its own disassembly drones to extend its own reach in the universe, create its singularity, and destroy everything in its path, with Earth as its first victim. You hear that bell? You know what time it is. It's time for a special speculation session! Session. Welcome to the special speculation session, where we end off a video with a bonus theory that doesn't have enough information to be a real theory, or will probably not be discussed in the media, but would be fun for us to talk about anyways. In this session, we will discuss the elevator at the very end of episode 6. Where does this elevator lead? Both Tessa and Doll want to go down this secret elevator, so this has to lead to something that benefits both of them. There are two possible ideas that I have based on the information we already know. This elevator could have led to the former location of the core, but now it has been destroyed. If the core was this vital that it can destroy all life on a planet, you don't want people to have easy access to it. The next idea is that this could also lead to a super secret experimentation lab. We know that Nori was one of the people who had access to this lab, and Nori was also one of the drones that was experimented on. It seems possible that this could be where those experiments occurred. Now, the most likely answer will be something else entirely that will be revealed for the first time in the next episode. It's hard to truly understand what's down there with the little information that we've gotten so far, but I truly think that the secret underneath this lab is a door. Well, that wraps up our time in the special speculation session, and that wraps up this video as well. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, and if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe. There will be more MurderDrones videos coming down the line, so make sure you ring the notification bell to stay up to date for those future uploads. Let me know what you think of this video down in the comments. Let me know if you have any evidence that could either support this theory or even disprove it. This is still just a theory, so it can always be disproven later down the line when we receive more information. If you want to talk to my team and I directly, check out our Discord or join our subreddit. Once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.